Our guest speakers for this presentation are the Brushwood Center at Ryerson Woods, Jessica Rodriguez and Eddie Flores. Jessica is the Coalition Building Manager at the Brushwood Center, helping to create awareness around environmental injustice within Lake County, as well as providing healing-based solutions for the relationship with nature through expertise as a certified nature and forest therapy guide. Eddie is the Youth Education Coordinator at the Brushwood Center, working on bilingual arts and nature-based youth programming through an environmental justice lens. Eddie is also the co-chair of Clean Power Lake County, bringing awareness to environmental justice issues at the organization through volunteering since 2019. And with that, please enjoy the presentation.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight, for being here this evening to listen to a report that recounts the story of environmental justice about health equity and nature in our changing climate, specifically here in Lake County, Illinois. We'll go ahead and begin to present to you all the findings of the Health Equity and Nature report that came up from Brushwood last summer. And after Eddie and I have gone through our presentation, we'll have some time at the end for some Q&A. So this report that came out last summer, Health Equity and Nature, a Changing Climate in Illinois, in Lake County, Illinois, centers on a way on how we can discuss specifically health equity and nature by both amplifying community voices and also looking for solutions. First and foremost, for those of you who may be unaware, the Brushwood Center at Ryerson Woods is a health, nature, and arts organization that is focused on creating different types of programming to connect people to nature for the purpose of increasing our health equity and access to nature. The Brushwood Center runs a variety of different programs, both with youth, families, military veterans, specifically oriented towards those who are facing racial and economic injustice.
Yeah, so just to kind of get you guys a little more familiar too, we have Brushwood by the numbers. So we engage with over 70 community partners. We've connected more than 9,000 people to art and nature since 2022. Those numbers have obviously increased year after year. Over the summer, we have over 1,500 students that experience field trips, art classes, concerts, and educational programs. We imagine that number is probably closer to like 2,500 now. Over 350 different veterans involved in our At Ease program. Over 300 different artists hosted. And then this summer, we're actually doing 1,500. We're distributing 1,500 backpacks across Lake County through our It's a Win program. And those are stuffed with different arts of nature supplies, school supplies, and then some tools to help kids get out into nature, like magnifying lenses, fun stickers. So I'll just kind of give you a little bit more context on the type of work that we do.
So the Health Equity and Nature report is filled with not just data and figures on the story of environmental justice, but as well as quotes directly from the community relaying their experiences. And we like to begin presenting this report by sharing a really powerful quote that came from one of our local community members in Round Lake, Maria Colunga, that goes as follows. We learn about nature and we remember our journeys. We remember the bond that we have with our ancestors, and that's how nature operates and how nature heals itself. And I think that was a beautiful thing. So why health equity in nature? I see that there are a few of us here in the room today. And I'm wondering if you yourselves have ever connected these themes and these topics, health equity and nature. And if you would like to take a moment to reflect to yourself, maybe drop it in the chat if you'd like, why you think it's important to talk about the intersection between health equity and nature. And as you take a moment to reflect and perhaps to yourself, or if you'd like to share, we would like to inform you all that the reason that the Brushwood Center came out with this report was years of collaboration with the community. The community saying that they knew and understood that there was a relationship between these different themes and topics, but that they didn't have a way to convey that information specifically and outlined in one way, that where they could talk to people about why this issue was so prevalent and how it was so interconnected, but no way to quote unquote prove that it was. So the Brushwood Center came out with this health equity and nature report so that we can compile all of that information in one spot. And so the goal of this report is to serve as a tool for community members, for organizations, and for people in decision-making power to improve health and well-being in Lake County. So that we can talk about, yes, James, the socioeconomic factors that affect access and health to nature, so that we can outline it, so that we can have maps and we can have data and we can point specifically to the facts. We'd like to give a special thanks to the Brushwood Center staff, the Report Advisory Board, all of the artists and additional contributors who helped make this report what it is. And to our funders that help us being able to support us financially as we do this research and this work. So the Brushwood Center's report, which I have a copy of right here, is about 92 pages, 10 chapters, and includes a variety of different artwork, maps, and figures, as well as an executive summary that you can find both in physical copies in English and Spanish, and electronic copies on our website in English and Spanish, as well as an executive summary that is also in English and Spanish. And today we're going to go through and touch a little bit about the different features of the report, like what helps frame this report, what helps us understand how this is connected. So the social drivers of health is the underlying theory. There are many theories, but is one of the main theories that the Brushwood Center has used to conceptualize this report. And the social drivers of health, as you can see in this lovely figure here, are conditions in which people are born, work, live, and play that affect the quality of life outcomes and risks that people might experience. And so the social drivers of health are also sometimes called the social determinants of health. However, the Brushwood Center specifically wants to use the term social drivers to reflect that health is something that people and communities together can overcome and change, as opposed to something that is fixed. So when we're considering things like health systems and services, education, public safety, and transportation, we want to be able to think about those things in ways in which we can work creatively to find solutions rather than things that permanently define us. And these different aspects of our environment are all constantly creating an effect on the way that we interact with our environment and the way that we feel able to interact with our environment. These are some of the methods that we used to collect all of our data. We've used existing data from a variety of different resources. We've used maps and also qualitative data in the form of interviews in the community, as well as art to help tell this story. And so what did we find? That across Lake County, green and blue space abounds. And so imagine for yourself, take another moment to yourself to think of a green or blue space that you feel connected to. Doesn't have to be in Lake County. And perhaps what it's like for you to be in that green or blue space. How do you feel when you're in that space? Imagining that space, also imagine that there are 50,000 acres of forest preserves and open space across Lake County that other people feel connected to. We have miles of Lake Michigan beaches, 200 lakes and rivers, 550 miles of trail and bikeway connections, all for people to be able to experience what you might be experiencing in the green or blue space you're imagining in your head. And yet, even with all of this space, we find that access remains a challenge. These figures here are some figures that are also found in the report that asks the question to different identity groups across Lake County of what concerns they have in visiting parks and open spaces. And you can see here in these figures specifically that the light green represents the percentage of people who have access, safety, or maintenance concerns. And the dark green represents the percentage of people who feel that there are no concerns in visiting parks or open spaces. And that the trend, at least in the left figure, is that those of the Black and African American community and of the Asian community have far more access and safety or maintenance concerns than those that are of the white community. And on the right, you can see that those of the Hispanic community or Latin community have more access, safety, or maintenance concerns compared to those who are not. The report also found that a variety of local residents also found nature as a source of healing. Here on this slide, you can see that there are more quotes of people expressing the relationship that they have found specifically between themselves and nature and how it has helped them. The report also offers us different maps to be able to give us some context to the specific circumstances that people are in. So in these sets of maps, you can see life expectancy, housing cost burden, and household income being outlined across Lake County. Where in the life expectancy map, the dark purple shows us who is expected to live between 79 to 82 years. And in the light pink, who is expected to live 64 and 70 years, giving us about a 14-year age gap between the life expectancy of different towns that are only about 14 minutes apart. In the other maps, you can see kind of an inverse relationship where those who are experiencing the most housing cost burdens that are expressed in the middle map of the darker red, compared to those who have the higher household incomes, which are represented in the dark green on the right-hand map, are sharing an inverse relationship, which expresses to us that there are also different burdens and experiences happening in those inverse relationships. The report also outlines industry and environmental injustice specifically. And so Eddie will go a little bit further on what is environmental injustice, but real quickly, I'll outline to you all that this map is showing us that there are 8 Superfund sites or areas of profound pollution in all of Lake County, and that 5 of those 8 Superfund sites are located in this dark green in northeastern Lake County. The same areas of the map that we saw in earlier that is also experiencing the lowest life expectancy, the highest housing cost burden, and the lowest in household income when it comes to comparatively across Lake County. And so I'll pass it off to Eddie to give us a little bit more information about what is environmental injustice and environmental racism.
Yeah, so I have a few terms up here. I have environmental justice, environmental racism, and fence line communities. Now these are the more textbook definitions, but I like to summarize these terms as environmental justice, ensuring that it's not just one community that's taking the brunt of all the environmental hazards. So like if one community is already facing environmental pollution from a number of bad neighbors, as we like to call them, a number of different polluters already in the community, making sure that they're not the community that's going to receive the dump that's going to be moved there. And so just ensuring that people are being treated fairly when it comes to our environment and hazards. There's environmental racism, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's the purposeful placement of things like environmental hazards, such as a new dump or a new, landfill in minority communities. Some could possibly already be experiencing environmental hazards, which is typically the case. And then the last definition is fence line communities. So it's just what it sounds like, communities where you the fence line, they're living on the fence line of where right across the street, that's where the environmental hazards are taking place. So looking across the street and there's a landfill there, or there's a huge industrial factories that are polluting the air. Um, and so as you can see here, continuing with that, environmental injustices, I have two more maps up here, such as asthma prevalence and diabetes prevalence on the right. And you can continue to see that trend where northeastern Lake County has the highest of these issues, the highest prevalence of these illnesses. Waukegan actually has the asthma prevalence, where 1 in 3 kids have asthma or asthma-like symptoms, compared to the national average of 1 in 12, 1 in 15. And that's directly related due to the air that they're breathing, the water that they're drinking, the environment that they're frankly just living in. And it continues to lead to things like lower life expectancy, as Jess was mentioning earlier. And so heading into the actual tour itself, our first stop is the Waukegan coal plant, which has a really long toxic legacy. So it's been around since 1923, so over 100 years. And in those 100 years, it continues to pollute, even though the plant's been shut down since June of 2022. We're now in 2024. It's been 2 years since it's been shut down. Yet it's still harming the community. So obviously when I was running, there was the air pollution, which led to Lake County getting grades of D's and F's for our air pollution, for our air quality, due to the pollution that was constantly going on. It's the reason why Waukegan residents have 1 in 3 kids have asthma or asthma-like symptoms. And even though it's shut down, it's no longer producing the traditional air contamination that we see from the burning. We still have coal ash, which is it's kind of similar to like when you have a bonfire and you have that white ash that starts to fly away. Same thing happens when you burn coal. And so instead of it letting coal plants just letting it fly away and contaminate the environment, they mix it with water and then store it on ponds, typically on the property. But this coal ash has all the really nasty chemicals and toxins in it. So you have things like arsenic, lead, you've got things like cadmium, really nasty heavy metals and toxins that are in this mixture that's essentially super concentrated. And so this is a picture of the Waukegan coal plant, the coal plant that is owned by NRG. And you can see the West Ash Pond right here, and you have the East Ash Pond. So these two are on the lakefront, but then you also have a legacy ash site that was used to store coal ash. It was never properly designed to hold it. Thus, this is where the majority of the groundwater contamination is actually occurring. In some spots, it's up to 15 feet deep and is in contact with groundwater. But you can see just how close these coal ash ponds are to Lake Michigan, which is the water source for millions of Americans. And so, as we start to see more and more impacts of climate change, we start to see more flooding, we start to see stronger storms. This is literally a ticking time bomb before, what combination of different factors are going to lead to these coal ash ponds leaching into Lake Michigan and harming the health of it. And so this is the first of our sites. This is on the lakefront. And continuing with coal ash, you could see the West Ash Pond, the East Ash Pond right here. And you can see, again, Lake Michigan's right here. What's highlighted in the orange, this red outline, these are other Superfund sites. But I just want to point out just how close this is to, some of our green spaces. So you can see that up here in the green, this is Illinois State Beach Park. You can see Bowen Park right here, and you can see the Waukegan Beach right here. And so this is where these, toxic sites are, right where people are trying to spend time outside and, experience the healing benefits of nature. You've got a state park here. You've got a beach that, families like to go and enjoy. And you have Bowen Park, one of our more popular parks here in Waukegan. And you can see this kind of, this cluster of toxic sites. And just to kind of highlight that harm, you can see that up on the screen, there's a statistic that says living near a wet coal ash pond like the ones on our lakefront is more dangerous than smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. Now, we all know how harmful, cigarettes are. There's plenty of data out there. Now imagine having those same health impacts or similar health impacts just because of where you're living, just because of where, you're spending time outside in nature. And so, this is a huge concern, huge health concern. And just to continue highlighting that, here we have from 2014, the National Air Toxics Assessment from the US EPA. So this is talking about ETO, ethylene oxide, which is a class 1 carcinogen that is being released in by Medline right here, right in the middle of this square. And so this is highlighting the cancer risks. So how many in a million are going to develop cancer over the course of their lifetime? And you can see in this kind of almost square, kind of like with a triangle here hanging off of it, you can see that the risk is over 100 in a million will develop cancer for people that live here. And so you can see that Park City is actually highlighted here. One of my close friends ended up moving there. And not long after she moved there, she ended up developing non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is one of the health illnesses that is linked to ETO, which is leads to cancer risks here that we're seeing. And so you see that even communities that are a little further out, you see Lake Bluff, Gurnee, where you're not necessarily right there. You can see that the cancer risks are still between 25 and 50 in a million will develop cancer. And I should kind of backtrack a little bit and explain a little more what ETO is. So ETO is, again, class 1 carcinogen, odorless and colorless, so you don't know when you're breathing it in. The reason why it's used for is for sterilization. At least that's what Medline uses it. Has some other uses, but they use it to sterilize things that can't be exposed to high heat or can't get wet. So things like gauze, cotton swabs, etc. But they tend to use it on everything, including things that can be sterilized through other methods, such as high heat, hydrogen peroxide, or steam. And so, you might have a surgical kit that has one or two things that can't get wet, but the majority of it can be sterilized through other methods. ETO will just go ahead and sterilize everything in that. Medline will just sterilize everything in that kit with ETO. And, they're creating unnecessary harms into the community by then releasing that gas and that carcinogen into our communities, which leads to again this higher cancer risk and thus a lower life expectancy in our communities. And next up, I want to highlight the Superfund sites. Just kind of briefly mentioned these a little bit, but Superfund, F-U-N-D, like money, not F-U-N, not that Superfund sites are not super fun. These are sites that are so contaminated they require federal funding in order to be cleaned up. So the US EPA will identify these sites and they'll place them on the National Priorities Listing, the NPL. And that's the list of the most contaminated sites. And they'll develop a plan for how they can start to clean up these sites and have these sites eventually be returned to use so that they can be redeveloped. They can be turned into, a benefit for the community, whether it's a store, whether it's a park, just so that it can be reused. And so we have 5 of them in Waukegan. 5 out of the 8 in Lake County are in Waukegan. 4 of them being right up along our lakefront. We touched on how Illinois Beach State Park was right there, right north of it. We see Bowen Park here, and again, Waukegan Beach. So in this kind of like 2-mile stretch is 4 of those. And so we have like Yeoman Creek landfill, which is right here. Johns Manville. We've got the 2 smaller sites are North Shore Gas, the North Plant and the South Plant that they used to have. And then we also have the Outboard Marine Corporation. I'll kind of briefly touch on these. So at Johns Manville, what they had was they had asbestos contamination. This is back before we found out about all the health impacts, but at the time, asbestos was this super substance that we could use. It's lightweight, it's fire resistant, it can stand up to high pressures. And so it was used in literally everything from building materials such as roofing tiles, you've got drywall, to being used in brake pads, to mattresses, and even clothing. And then, we started finding out about all the health impacts. The workers that would work at these plants that handled asbestos would start to get sick. They would start to get mesothelioma, and other illnesses related to asbestos exposure. And so that's what this whole site is. It's asbestos. It's since been had topsoil added to reduce that exposure. But if you go to the property line, you can see that there's signs warning people not to create dust because of that risk that's still there. Right at OMC, again, this is right along our lakefront, the road to get to Waukegan's Beach. So at OMC, you had PCB contamination. So they would build outboard motors. For those of you who aren't familiar with them, I like to mention it in old cartoons like Tom and Jerry. When they would go fishing out in the lake and they have that like smaller boat with the motor that you can tip in. Those are outboard motors. And so they use PCBs and TC trichloroethene in the manufacturing of those motors, to lubricate and degrease them. And they would just use so much of it. They would use millions and millions of barrels and gallons of it that it eventually leached into Lake Michigan. And PCBs, to kind of give a little more context to, is this subset of 100 or so different chemicals that have the same similar structure. But that same structure that they have allows them to stick to the fatty tissue of animals. And so mainly fish, as fish would kind of swim in it, it'd be absorbed into their bodies. And then the fish that are older, the fish that are bigger, as they eat other fish, their concentration is the highest. And so you have people that are getting exposed to PCB not just by swimming there, but also through the food that they're eating, the fish that they're eating from Lake Michigan. And then just to quickly touch on Yeoman Creek landfill, that's a landfill that was literally in the middle of town, so right around Section 8 housing. And it was used as both municipal waste and waste from laundromats and stuff. But it's literally right across the street from apartment buildings. Even then, and then kids, they see this giant field of grass that's covered, and that's the literal definition of a fence line community if you've ever been there, take a tour there. But these are just some of the sites from that we like to give a tour on. And so I'll pass it over to Jess to talk about furthermore about the systemic inequities assessment.
Thank you, Eddie, for that deep dive into the specifics of exactly what is going on specifically in Lake County. And with all the information we've given you and all the maps that we've presented to you with today, this map right here is the Systemic Inequities Assessment map. And so this map takes 38 different data points to kind of really combine and visualize the whole range of systemic inequities in Lake County in one map. And we can see that this map as well displays a similar pattern to the other maps that we've seen, where the dark blue is supposed to represent those who are most overburdened, and then the white, the light green, the least overburdened. This conveying the same information we've kind of been hearing, that specifically when we're considering environmental injustice in Lake County, we are seeing that takes place specifically in northeastern Lake County. As we continue to address who is most overburdened now, we're also going to need to consider how to help support those communities when we consider things like our changing climate. So when we're considering issues like rising temperatures and increased precipitation, that will only increase different types of burdens that different communities will face. We need to understand who is going to need that support and to create resiliency now, so that when issues like heat-related illnesses and increased allergens and decreased food availability and increased mosquito-borne illnesses occur, those communities are set up so that we are not being reactive, but proactive. And so also, it's really important for us to understand that with all the information that is part of this report that feels very, for a lack of a better term, doom and gloom, that it's also important to highlight the different ways in which we can continue to combat these different inequities and burdens. And so the Brushwood report, the Health Equity and Nature report, also outlines over 60 recommendations categorized under these 6 themes. And these recommendations are for anyone to use to inspire creativity and to implement into their program. And the Brushwood Center is excited to announce a few different ways in which we are using this report to inform our work. Before I touch on what's continuing on our slides, I want to add that tomorrow we will be showcasing a way in which the Brushwood Center has utilized the findings of this report to convey the story of environmental justice in a creative way. Tomorrow, the Brushwood Center is premiering a program known as Convergence, Health Equity in a Changing Climate, which is a 90-minute music program that tells the story that we just heard here today through art and music, as well as narration, both in English and Spanish. And the purpose of this program is to be able to think more artistically about how we can utilize this information to not just disseminate and educate, but to also inspire and to cultivate a sense of hope. Speaking of hope, the Brushwood Center is also working on recommendation number 5 from our Health Equity and Nature report, which focuses on integrating nature-based solutions into the healthcare system. So myself, as part of the Health Equity and Nature Accelerator team, and in collaboration with a community psychology PhD candidate at DePaul, have been working in collaboration with local community healthcare workers, in collaboration with researchers from Rosalind and Franklin University, and in collaboration with an advisory board to co-create a mental health intervention training program that utilizes the knowledge that we have on how nature can help benefit our health, the knowledge that we have in power in community, to create a series of sessions that focused on incorporating different tools and practices and strategies into our daily lives for the purpose of cultivating radical hope and healing. And radical hope is this idea of having trust or aspirations during times of grave injustice. And when we're considering what it means to have hope at a time of injustice, we're considering of having a perspective that is different and courageous. And this is really important when we consider the communities that are facing the different systemic inequities that we just went over and that are most overburdened by those systemic inequities. And it's important to consider how we can help those specific communities process and heal from the different types of trauma that they may be experiencing that comes with that burden. We are incorporating practices such as forest bathing or forest therapy, which is a flexible and open-ended nature wellness practice focused on cultivating presence through nature. And we are integrating this practice in combination with practices like mindfulness and third wave cognitive behavioral therapy. And we have already begun to create a manual that outlines this kind of intervention program. And we've already begun to train the community healthcare workers who will then offer the intervention program to the community later this fall. We hope to be able to expand this project to 5 other different community partners and organizations in Lake County. all the while collecting data and incorporating feedback to make sure that this specific project is both culturally relevant, accessible, and statistically significant. This project, along with the project that I talked about that will be premiering tomorrow, are both utilizing the report as not necessarily an end-all be-all, but seeing the report as a seed or as a rock in the pond that creates the ripples to think creatively on how we can address environmental injustice in Lake County. Thank you all for listening and for bearing with us during our presentation this evening. And we would be happy to take questions, comments, concerns, feedbacks, creative ideas and solutions, or anything that came up for you during our presentation.
Could you guys touch on one more time some of the things that might have caught on the most with individuals who have read the report and were trying to see what they could do to, keep mindful of that conservation efforts, from a individual perspective? Was there anything that kind of caught on the most there?
Yeah, that's a great question. It would be, we just had our annual community leadership roundtable yesterday, actually, where a group of a variety of different community organizers and decision makers and just local community members were able to come together to kind of discuss the different ways that we have implemented the report. Because at last year's community roundtable, we showcased and announced the report. And so a year later, we were able to come together and talk about the different ways that it's shown in our lives. And when that information comes, we will have a more concrete understanding of how the general public has really utilized this report. For now, I'll say that some big key takeaways that I'm hearing in my conversations with people are a few things. Number one, which is it seems incredibly simple, but you'd be surprised at how often it doesn't happen, is simply translating materials or learning how to communicate with people across languages. Oftentimes, when we're considering issues of climate change, sustainability, restoration, or even just like park maps and ways in disseminating information about like outdoor recreation, a lot of that material is in English. And a lot of that material is not accessible to our communities who are facing these systemic inequities and burdens. And sometimes even when that material is translated, the material is not always translated, if you will, both in English and in Spanish in ways that are accessible to all reading levels, keeping in mind all the different education levels we're trying to communicate to about climate change, about environmental injustice, and how sometimes we can become a little bit too focused on the academic side, which is really important, but we need to also think about how we can communicate in a way that is accessible to everyone. So that's one of the bigger ones. And as well, recommendation number one, which was centering community voices and assets, which is talking directly to community members and asking them what they would like to see in their communities and valuing that opinion. And so that is something that you can do. Both those things are things that you can kind of think about on the individual level in how you create your own materials, whether that's materials for your organization or materials for any other types of advocacy work that you're doing. Eddie, I don't know if you have anything to add about.
No, yeah, I'd echo both those same things. I mean, I think it's just recently the Forest Reserve, Lake County Forest Reserve, just said that they were gonna start producing their materials in English or in English and Spanish, which is something that the communities have been asking for a really long time now. And again, same thing, just centering community voices, hearing to what the community wants, what the community needs. A lot of the times the solutions are already known. It's just the access to resources hasn't been there, whether that's funding, whether that's actual people doing work, etc. But the community already knows. They know what the problems are, what they're facing. They just, need actual action. Mhm.
Could you tell us a little bit about Clean Power Lake County?
Yeah, I'd love to. So, Clean Power Lake County is an environmental justice organization that was founded in 2013. We started doing work around the coal plant, and trying to ensure a just transition. So, making sure that the coal plant wasn't just shut down, but that and that the community wasn't left with another Superfund site, a sixth Superfund site, if you will, but ensuring that the community was able to ensure that the coal ash the property would be cleaned up and we wouldn't just be left with an eyesore. Since then, we started focusing on other environmental justice issues that have popped up, such as the ETO. That was a big that really came to light in 2018. And so focusing on that, but also just doing work on other environmental justice issues we've seen across Waukegan and Lake County. We actually recently just got our paid staff. And so that's pretty awesome at the start of this year. And so we were able to hire Frank, who's our community organizer. So we're starting to become a little more active. And we also are having our office space in Waukegan with Brushwood. So it's a joint office, Brushwood and CPLC, which both Jess and I will be, our positions will be based out of that office. I believe July 1st is our move-in date. So pretty excited for that, just to be more accessible to the public.
Congratulations with that. Very exciting.
Thank you.
I also wanted to ask, on behalf of, maybe both Brushwood Center and Clean Power Lake County, if there are any upcoming programs that our audience could be mindful of moving into July or August or beyond for the rest of 2024.
Yeah. Again, I'd highlight Convergence, which is tomorrow. Another plug for that at the Gordon Center. We still have tickets available. We can definitely share that link out. It's not the only time to see Convergence. We'll also have a showing in August 24th at Waukegan. And so just tomorrow is the premiere. But we have that coming up. In terms of Clean Power Lake County, I know we're trying to the EPA just released the ASTDR, more info about ethylene oxide. And so we're working on setting up a time to be able to do help people write their comments, to submit comments for that. I don't have a date on when that public info comment helping to write those public comments, when that session is going to be. I know yesterday they just had last night actually, they had that public info session, but we're looking at, I think, in the next 2-3 weeks, setting up a meeting so that we can help the public write their comments for that. But those are the two off the top of my head. I don't know, Jess, if you have any other upcoming events we have.
Not with any specific dates in mind, but Eddie and I are also working on collaborating on another type of project, which is a environmental justice healing tour of Lake County, where we are going to combine our specific different areas of expertise, to create this tour of Lake County that will take place in 2 parts. The first part is a tour guided by me as a certified nature and forest therapy guide in a 1.5-hour nature and forest therapy experience in a green space in northeastern Lake County, most likely Bowen Park or Greenbelt Forest Preserve. And the second half of the tour is guided by Eddie, where he takes us through kind of a history and actual mobile tour of a few of not all, but a few of the different toxic sites of Lake County, with the purpose of creating a holistic perspective on the different ways that the environment can heal us, but also in ways that the environment is hurting us, but not necessarily because of the environment, but because of the ways in which we've hurt the environment. To create and foster this holistic perspective. Eddie and I are both in the midst of really intense summer programming. Eddie with the backpack program and distribution for different youth and families across Lake County, and myself in co-creating that mental health intervention I spoke a little bit about earlier. So this project has been taking a little bit of a side seat, but is soon to come forward, and we hope to be part of our programming outside of the Waukegan office.
So we have a comment from the chat here. Jake says, lovely presentation. Is the tour of the toxic sites going to have transportation provided, or is that up to the attendees?
Great question, Jake. So Eddie and I are looking into having a central meetup location, probably at one of the green spaces that I said. And we are looking to use our funding to provide a van of some sorts to be able to take people through the second half of the tour. And so because of this, it would also probably mean that the size of the groups that we're able to facilitate will probably be limited. But we are looking to also provide this tour to a range of people. And so we hope to do many of the tours, but yes, we are looking to provide transportation. It's much easier that way to facilitate the second half of the tour.
My specific question is this: I live in Lake County, but I taught in Chicago public schools for over 30 years. And one of the big issues you have with health equity in Chicago is a little different from what your emphasis was tonight. And that is with regard to food deserts and the health of people living in these communities and the level of diabetes and hypertension and so forth. And I was wondering to what degree you thought that food deserts were an issue in Lake County.
Yeah, that's a great question. In terms of the report specifically, the report comes out, we imagine, in iterations, right? Where it doesn't cover every single different inequity that we are experiencing. And food accessibility is definitely an aspect of inequity that is missing from the report and should be added to our continued expansion of our understanding. In terms of what we're doing in terms of actions related to food equity, I am, as the coalition building manager at the Brushwood Center, part of a new group that is forming called Lake County Grows, which is focused on connecting different organizations and businesses that are focused on creating a local food system coalition across Lake County to help us address that specific issue. The coalition is in its beginning iterations, and we're defining our values and our missions and what strategies we're going to use to build this coalition. So it is on our minds and it is on our radar, because we do understand that in similar ways that we saw with the housing burden map and the life expectancy map and this overall 38 data points, we expect that the burden of food access is probably a similar pattern that we've seen in the other maps. And so we don't have that map specifically, but we know about it. Thank you for bringing that up.
Just thank you, Eddie and Jess. Thank you for your work. Thank you for your passion.
Thank you so much.